Hello, it's Simon Phillips here from the ChangeMaker group, and I'm going to be joined in just a second by Pete, Jacob, and Angie Beeston, and we're going to be walking you through the #1 skill of a ChangeMaker. So we're just waiting for a few people to join us who are coming through the system right now, and we'll be getting started in about 60 seconds. So grab a pen, get yourself comfortable, because we've got lots to share with you in a very short space of time. So look forward to talking to you all in a moment. So just in terms of what you can see, you have a chat box where you can put in your comments. We'll be asking you a few questions throughout. Please just feel free to put those in there. Then right at the end, we'll be doing a Q&A. So if you've asked a question along the way, or thought of a question along the way, we will address them all at the end of the presentation. Other than that, we should be free to just get going. So welcome everyone. It's great to see you all this evening. And for those of you watching in replay, and we understand that most of you will be watching in replay based on the Facebook comments and the messages we've received, you're very welcome too. And your comments, your chat points will be received by us via email even after the live webinar. So if you're watching this on replay, feel free to add to the chat, and Pete, Angie, and I will receive those, and if there's a specific thing we can help with, then we'll do that. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Pete and Angie to introduce themselves, and we'll start with Pete.
Well, hello there everyone. Good evening, good morning, wherever you happen to be listening to this webcast. I'm delighted to be with you today. My name is Pete Jacob. I'm a consultant working in a number of spaces, but one of the most passionate, or one of the areas I'm most passionate around is the whole space of personal productivity. So my background is I had around 28 years working at IBM in various different sorts of guises, most of that marketing and sales, but I ran some large teams, teams up to about 60 people at one point. Any of you who are working in corporate life, you'll know that lots of corporate life is lots of meetings, lots of emails, lots of process. I was that soldier. So those of you where that is your world, I think I recognize that world, where the world is much more about how do you get any work done in between. The last 3 years or so, though, it's been much different. I left IBM and I've been working much more with small project teams or working by myself, where it's the other extreme. It's about very little email, frankly, very few meetings, and actually meetings are something I sometimes look forward to as a means to move things forward. And so now the question becomes more about how do I ensure that I'm doing the right work. So hopefully there'll be some things that we address through the next several minutes that will, whichever end of that spectrum you're in, some things hopefully for all of you. So that's my intro.
Thank you, Pete. And now Angie.
Hello everybody, good evening. Lovely to be here on our first spring summit of the ChangeMaker group. My name is Angie Beeston, Simon said. My background is sales and marketing. I used to work for Royal Doulton when it was a global entity years ago. I've worked in various departments, seen a lot of things, worked with corporate life, and came out of that several years ago to work with SME. Our small business contingency, and it's interesting because a lot of the issues that are found in corporate world also happen in the small business world too. And as a business owner myself now, as Pete says, it's a lot less about emails. I'm looking forward to meetings, which can be very productive. I've got a real passion and enthusiasm to help others. That's what I want to do. I want to get things done, get people more productive, and help with well-being as well, because time is so demanding. We need as much help as we can get to do things differently. I've had a lot of support in the past with fantastic people who've actually taught me a lot. We put them into practice, and it does become a habit eventually. I really want to try and make a difference for others. So improved understanding around mastering time, and it's all about that well-being, and that's really, really important. So yeah, that's all about me.
Thank you, Angie. So we've got one big objective this evening, which is to help you discover the #1 skill of a change agent, a change maker, indeed. So we're going to be sharing that with you, just so that you know. There's always the potential when you're doing live broadcasts through the internet that there will be a few glitches along the way. So we do a very good job at looking as if we're really calm about it. There's lots of scurrying in the background when that happens, but we'll be fine, and we'll certainly be back with you if there's any short intermission while we're touching up our makeup. Who knows what we're doing? So yeah, don't worry if there's any glitches. That just happens with this technology. As I said, if you're watching the replay, feel free to put your comments in the chat, and also I just wanted to let you know we've got a really big offer that you may be interested in at the end of this presentation. So stick around. Pete and I have something that we want to share with you, and we think you're going to like it. So before we go any further, we're going to test this technology to the limit and see if it'll just play a little video that we've got set up for you. So fingers crossed, this is going to work.
Chapter 4, Time Management. Always postpone meetings with time-wasting morons.
How do you do that?
Can I get back to you on that?
I've got a funny feeling you didn't actually see the video, but you might have heard it. So we'll play that. We'll put the link in, and you can get that in your email later. Anyway, let's get started. So what we did. Oh, it looks like you are actually getting the video. You're a little bit behind the live broadcast, so we're all good. What we're going to do now is we're going to set you a quick poll and ask you a quick question. So all of you on the summit and all of you watching the replay, tell us your answer to this. So what's your biggest time-munching challenge? Is it emails, instant messages? Is it meetings? Is it feeling overwhelmed? Is it work-life balance? Oh, interesting. Interesting. Don't know if we've got all the results in yet. Anybody? Oh, it's changing all the time here. This is better than Eurovision. I'm going to be coming back. So what have we got? Is that the end? Is that everybody? Looks like we've got the results in. So I'll say them just in case it doesn't click up on the screen. #1 biggest challenge for you is emails and instant messages. #2 is feeling overwhelmed. #3 is meetings. And 0% from the group watching is work-life balance. So that's fantastic. I don't know what you're all doing here at 7 o'clock in the evening if work-life balance is so great. No, I'm only kidding. So really interesting results. So I'm going to just end that poll. And what I'm going to do is quickly share with you the results of the same poll that we did online recently. And let me just share that with you. Present to everyone. So with a much bigger group, this was the result with them. #1 for them was feeling overwhelmed. 2 was meetings, and equal third was email, instant messaging, and work-life balance. So, so what we thought we would do in this webinar is go through our top tips. As Pete and Angie said, they spend a lot of time with individuals, constantly working on these items, and it was a big feature in the Mastering Time book, which came out a little while ago. So we hope that we've got some really good tips for you this evening. Well, we know we have. So we're going to cover those one at a time, and I believe we're going to go over first to Pete, who's going to give us some tips on feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. So, so on that survey that we just saw, the topic that came out top in terms of the biggest time munching challenge that people have was this whole feeling of overwhelm. So we're going to go through each of those 4, though, because as you'll have seen from the live poll and from the poll that we took previously, depending on the day or the time or the person, clearly there can be a lot of variety in terms of which of these 4 aspects are a greater challenge. But we're going to start by having a look at that feeling overwhelm. And from work I've done with clients and things that I've learned myself, I wanted to share a handful of things that I think I've picked up along the way that have helped me try and stay sane, in control, in those times when it's so easy just to collapse into a heap. So what are some of the things that I like to suggest that you consider? And I strongly use the word suggest, because as you'll see with all of these tips, we're not here trying to be really prescriptive about this is exactly what you must do if you ever want to have a balanced life or be productive. This is very much about trying to offer you some things that we've learned and that we've observed either personally or with others that you may just want to consider. But at the end of the day, this whole system, this whole way we approach our work is a very, very personal topic, and you have to find your own way around it. So here's a few things that I've learned, things that I tend to do when I feel things are starting to get on top of me. The first thing that I often reach for is what I like to call my mind sweep. And what do I mean by that? The principle of this is very simple. It's a little bit like, and I'm sure you've all experienced this, when we're in a meeting and someone starts a conversation and then all of a sudden we say, and that reminds me, and we go on to another point. All a mind sweep is a way to try and get the brain to do the things it does best. The brain is fantastic at things to do with creativity, but the brain is not so great, in fact pretty lousy, when it comes to trying to remember stuff. So the purpose of a mind sweep is really just to try and get everything out of your head and get it down onto a piece of paper. And you know what? The neuroscience research tends to suggest just that very act of reflecting and capturing things down onto paper actually starts to release positive chemicals within the brain, even without having done anything yet, even without done anything other than just write some stuff down. It creates some positive energies within the brain. So when I talk about the mind sweep that I tend to do, this will be a semi-structured approach that says, let me think about what I've done yesterday. What thoughts that may come to mind as to things that I might want to consider doing something about. What about the meetings I had yesterday? What about the meetings I've got coming up? What about the relationships I've got at home? What about my relationship with my boss? What about the key projects that are going on? So a number of different areas that just act as a little short circuit, if you like, that tend to prompt me to have some thoughts around some things that I may want to put some more attention on. So I can do this in 10 or 15 minutes. It's a quick brain dump. You don't want to overthink it. You don't want to overstress it. You don't want to overanalyze it. You just get on and get on with it. So that's one thing, mind sweep. So I offer that to you. Second thing I was going to suggest is having built a list of what at this point is stuff. It's not really much more than that. That is really just a start point. What we now need to do is we now have potentially an overwhelming list of stuff. I mean, typically, if you go through an exercise like this, you might end up with anything up to 100 or so different line items scribbled down onto a piece of paper. But that's still an overwhelming list. So we need to break that list down a little bit more. What I tend to do is look at that from three perspectives. One of context, i.e., based on where I am right now, what can I do? So, if the thing I've written down is the light is broken in the bathroom and I happen to be in the office at the moment, then that's clearly not something that would be appropriate. So if I actually have a context around all those items, then I'm just looking at the things that are relevant to me at the point in time that I'm looking at the various views of the list. So that's one view I tend to take on my long list. The other view I tend to take is around energy. Some things will need a lot of energy. Some things will be really quick ones that you can do and maybe are fantastic to do when you really frankly don't have much energy at the end of the day. So that's another lens I often use on it. But the third one is around this whole area of urgency or important. So I tend to break my lists down into three and say, what are the musts, what are the shoulds, and what are the coulds? So the musts are the ones that have an absolute due date today. So, prep today for a meeting first thing tomorrow morning would be a classic example. Shoulds would be things that are really important but aren't necessarily quite so time bound. And coulds will be all the other things that I'm still genuinely committed to, because otherwise they shouldn't be on my list at all, but maybe they don't have quite the same level of priority. So that's the other concept I wanted to raise, just this must, should, could. Third thing I wanted just to mention quickly was this area of what I try to do before I leave each day, and I've seen a lot of other people use this too, before I leave work each day, to think through on tomorrow and build my list for tomorrow before I go home tonight. Why do I do that? I do that because it's three things really. I think one, when I wake up in the morning, I know exactly what I'm needing to do rather than waste time in the morning doing that. Secondly, I've got this added benefit that my subconscious has been working on that stuff overnight anyway, whilst I've been sleeping. And so actually some of these things have started to resolve themselves. And the other thing, more pragmatically, is that actually it provides a really good way of being able to, for me to be able to deliver my plan for the day rather than being subjected to somebody else's when I get into the office. So there's a few things just to think about. But I wonder, Angie, are there additional things that you'd like to share with the team, I wonder?
I think actually it's interesting what you said about having three lists, the musts, the shoulds and the coulds, because I tend to take a very sort of quite a strict view about what my to-do list is, because I've learnt from past experience that if I write massive to-do lists, nothing gets done. I just keep writing lists for the sake of lists. So one thing I've found is if I write three key things each day that I want to get done, and I prioritise those, so they're my musts, if you like. And sometimes it's the three things that are going to make a difference either to me personally, move me towards a bigger goal. It could be something I want to do, like revamping a website. So often those three things can be linked. So sometimes you find it's towards that bigger goal, we can do those, and it's just in one specific area. I find that's quite useful for me because it keeps me quite focused. And the other element for me as well is to time them. So when I set aside assuming I know where I am that day and where my meetings are and travel time and everything, and allowing for some contingency, of course. But I will actually place those into a time. So what I can do is I also set my alarm, because I've learned that if you're going to do something, you set yourself an alarm, you're more likely to finish it, or at least have 3/4 of it done. So there's a sense of satisfaction, and that does help me to focus my mind, and it stops all the distractions from emails, phone, and everything else, because and that's very useful. So 3 things that I need to do each day. So I've got a little notebook, and I keep them very handy.
Excellent. Simon, are there any others you'd like to contribute?
Yeah, I was just thinking that's a really good list, and the one that I always like to come back to, which a lot of people don't necessarily think is a possibility, is that I create a not to do list. How many of you have been working, or you've transposed the same to do list day after day after day, and the same items are still there at the end of the day that were there at the start, and you put them on another list tomorrow. So basically, if something's been trailing over maybe 2 or 3 days, and it gives me an opportunity to reevaluate it. So putting a title at the top of a page saying not to do list gives me that opportunity to really think hard about some of the items on my list and get them off there quickly if it's not really going to add any value.
Excellent. Thanks, Simon. So there we have a few suggestions around this whole area of overwhelm. Angie, why don't you move us forward and so we think about that second category that was on the list, which was this whole area of meetings and how to make meetings more productive.
Thank you, Pete. Yeah, it's interesting because sometimes meetings can be the bane of people's lives. It's that feeling that you should actually be somewhere else and you inwardly groan because you've got lists and lists of things to do, emails to answer, and you just don't want to. You need to be in the meeting, but you really want your head's elsewhere. So with experience, we've got some tips that I use, which again might be helpful. As both Simon and Pete have said, these are not prescriptive. We tend to cherry pick what works for us, really. But if I can share some of the things that I've used, certainly before meetings, what I will always do is actually think about the agenda. What's the objective of that meeting? Which I know is quite a corporate word, but having an objective, a reason, a purpose for the meeting really helps to focus and minimise the time duration. So even if it's a very short meeting, I will actually do that before I go in, so I've got it clear in my mind what I need to do. You might need to ask other attendees who are coming to the meeting, particularly if it's internal, if they need to prepare information beforehand. Again, it saves time. They might even send it around so you can read it beforehand. And again, when you come into the meeting, it's much more productive because you've got time to actually think about it and reflect before the actual meeting. So I found that's quite useful beforehand. And scheduling some contingency time, because even the best made plans can go slightly awry. So sometimes you might need to allow an extra half an hour or so just to make sure that you can actually still be on time. And if you've got another meeting afterwards, you don't start, your head doesn't start wandering and you lose focus. If appropriate, I'll send materials on ahead as well, and as I say, let others read, so everyone is informed if that's appropriate. One thing sort of during the meeting, which I was actually advised about this ages ago, and I've found it so useful, it's the killer question, particularly with new client meetings, is, so what would you like to get or achieve from our meeting today? And that is a very powerful question to ask because it sets the stall out. Particularly if it's with a potential new client, you're almost getting permission of how long you have with them for the meeting, which again I've found very useful because it helps them to relax. They're very busy people too. For 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and you stick to that, you will have a lot more respect from people, especially when they're under time constraints. I will also check if I can beforehand how much time I have got allocated so we can have that good conversation, and it keeps everything in the present and stops people worrying about looking at the watch thinking they've got to go elsewhere. And the one thing I will try to do is keep to time. So if things start to go off on a tangent, as you said earlier on, Pete, about things you suddenly think, oh God, that's not in context, what I'll try and do is either bring it back to the core objectives or suggest that more information sought and we come back to it. We take it offline so it doesn't distract. And another tool is if you want to keep the meeting short, is to remove all the chairs, which is actually quite controversial. But if you remove the chairs, it really does give focus. So if you are in a company and you have to have regular meetings with your team, a quick stand-up round tall coffee bar tables with no chair time, because not everybody gets too comfortable then. And I think it's a phenomenal tip for people who are very busy, who are trying to deal with situations like that. But Simon, it'd be really useful to sort of know what kind of approach you like to take.
So I'd like to share a little story, if I may, Angie. It's about a guy who was a chief exec of one company and he moved to another. And the company he'd come from, everybody arrived on time for meetings. There was a real structure and a real purpose to their meetings. In the new one, the new organization, he found himself sitting there with one or two people waiting for people to arrive for up to 5 and 10 minutes at a time. And he thought, I need to fix this, because he really wanted to help people understand the value of the time that they were effectively wasting. So he put a big alarm clock in the center of the table, and when the first person, so let's say I was sitting there with two people, and then 2 minutes later, after the designated start time, Angie walked in. He stopped the clock and seemed to be writing something in front of him. And he started the clock again, and lo and behold, 3 minutes later, so effectively 5 minutes late, in walks Pete Jacob, that perennial latecomer, and so he stops the clock again and he's writing something. And effectively what he was doing was writing out an invoice for the people that had arrived late. And the invoice was for the number of people sat around the table times their hourly rate, and then divided effectively by the number of minutes that they were late. And very quickly, people started to arrive on time for his meetings. Now, he was the CEO, the chief exec, so he was able to give people invoices. You may not be in that position, but it is worth maybe telling people in your team that story and helping them understand the real value of a meeting. I mean, I was in a meeting recently, and I looked around the table, and I estimated, just to get the group of people around the table, it was probably costing something like £1,500 an hour to have that meeting. So it puts that thought in your mind of exactly, are we generating £1,500 worth of value by in the course of this meeting? And if you're not, then maybe let's reevaluate how we're going to do that. The other quick point is I insist on any meetings that I'm going to that there's no AOB, because any other business, if you think about it, means that you can't set an end time to the meeting. Any other business should be agreed up front with the meeting organizer or the chair of the meeting, and it's up to them as to whether or not they're going to allow it onto the agenda, and they fix a time for it. Whereas AOB, you could be there all day. So they're two tips that I tend to look if I can stick to.
I think
Angie, if I may,
thank you for that, Simon. I think that's really interesting. Yeah, sorry, Pete. Go on. Sorry.
So I was just going to say, if I could add just one, it was not dissimilar to Simon's actually, which I've seen a client use, which was this problem of people turning up late to the meetings, and often it's because they have a 9 o'clock until 10 o'clock meeting, then they got a 10 o'clock until 11 o'clock meeting, and so the day goes, and there's no transit time allowed, and there's no time to have a comfort break, etc. And so you waste the first 10 minutes of the meeting. So what I'd seen someone do, there's no mandate that says meetings have to start at the top of an hour. And what he started to do was starting meetings at slightly random times, 8 minutes past 10, 11 minutes past 10. In other words, say, okay, you've got time for that quick coffee on the way through, but we will start prompt at the prescribed time. And that I found was a nice quirky little way of handling some of these issues. So Andy, should I move on to email, do you think?
Just before you do, if I could just wrap up with after meetings.
Oh, of course, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay, no problem. I'm just thinking that to make sure we've got focus and the meetings do have purpose, as you've both pointed out, I think it's a cracking idea to start meetings at random minutes after the hour. I think it's a fantastic, great way forward. But I think if we actually give ownership to people to make sure that they understand what they need to do, that they're accountable, if you like, so that the next time you have another meeting, people feel there's a sense of purpose, that the costs, as Simon alluded to, that it's £1,500 for a group of high level, we can see some real value from it. There's a point of it, because then we wouldn't have so much resentment building up about meetings. So, and also calendars, because I know, Pete, you've got some ideas around calendars. So I don't know if you'd like to just quickly share those, some points that people might find quite useful.
Yeah, I think with calendars, yeah, I'm a big fan of using the color that's provided within the calendar applications that if you're using a digital calendar, so you have different roles you have through the day. Maybe you're in a review meeting or a personnel meeting, or maybe it's just pieces of work that you want to get done that are part of your agenda. I'm a big fan of any big chunks of work as well as meetings ought to go on the calendar so that you can protect that time from other people. Otherwise, other people will just decide to book you as and when fits then. But color is a good way, I find, of just being able to instantly see what have you actually got on the schedule. I think that's one of the key tips I would share and that I've learned over the years.
I do like that idea, Pete. I think having colour coding and avoiding that. And I also, although I like technology, I also like my paper diary. Much to the amusement of some people, but I do still like my paper diary, and I will keep notes in there as well. And I quite enjoyed writing my maps and sense of purpose in there. So I'll use both. I use both Outlook, and I also use my good old trusted paper diary too. But Pete, as you mentioned, it'd be really good to go on to tips for email. If I can pass over to you for that, that would be fantastic.
Okay, of course. Thanks very much, Angie. So email was, in the survey we did at the beginning of this call, email was the #1 thing that people were citing. And I think email has, for many of us, has become a little bit of a beast. But as with many beasts, there are ways of taming these things. And a few things that I've seen clients do or that I practice myself, there's probably three I wanted to bring to everyone's attention. The first is almost a philosophical point, which is I believe that it's absolutely essential to separate email from the concept of task management or to-do lists. Why do I say that? If I think of inbox, well, in fact, let's take it beyond email. What is an inbox? An inbox is nothing more than a place to store stuff before we've decided what their rightful place is. Okay, so email inbox is one of these, but of course we've got several others. We have voicemail, we have meetings that generate ideas and potential actions, conversations or thoughts that we have ourselves. So at best, email can only ever be one of our inboxes, and so therefore it's got to be, I would have thought, a potential error if we use that as our sole inbox. So I'm a big fan of separating the two, going into the email inbox and taking an approach to what I would call processing it rather than actually living in it. By processing it, I mean the important question you're trying to get answered when you go into an email is, what is it, and is there an action that's associated with it, or is it something that you can delete or delegate or what have you? And if there is an action, then you capture that into whatever is your preferred way of handling action lists, whether that's paper or digital or whatever. So I think that separation I find really, really helpful. Second thing I would then say is many of us spend too much of our lives living in email, and there really is no need. I think if you take this processing approach, it is perfectly feasible to just be processing email at regular points during the day. I tend myself to just try and touch my email late on in the morning, once again in the afternoon, and then once again before the end of the day. And I do that deliberately in those 2 or 3 blasts. And also, you'll notice I said I do not do this first thing in the morning. And that, again, is a very conscious thing from my perspective. It works for me, but my logic being that first thing in the day, chances are I have the most energy that I will have for the rest of the day. So better to use that energy to actually advance the task that I really want to move forward, rather than spend it just processing email. So, so my second point would be process emails at set points during the day. And the third thing that I've observed is I see an awful lot of people spend an awful lot of time, it seems to me, managing and maintaining their lists of folders for storing all of their emails so that they may be able to retrieve them later. And if that's the way you run your email and it works for you, then good for you. However, what I tend to find is that I think the email clients themselves have pretty good search facilities these days as part of them. So I don't think it's now any longer required to have a very rigid folder structure system for finding all of your emails, because you can probably get to it with a search quicker than you can any other way. And besides which, you then always have that problem of, is this email filed under Pete, or is it filed under the project I was working on with Pete? And you avoid that sort of an issue through a quick use of search. So there's a couple of things that come to mind immediately for me. Simon, do you have any other ones you'd like to chip in?
Just one quick one, Pete, and that's something we call the 4 Ds. So it's to enable you to effectively just touch your emails once. So you've maybe heard somebody say in the past, just touch your emails once. Well, that's can feel quite restrictive, especially if you're just trying to do a quick review. So the 4 Ds are that you can do it, you can deal with it there and then, you can decide to ditch it. You can immediately decide, okay, that's got nothing to do with my workload, so I'm going to ditch that one. You can delegate it, and in the true meaning of the word, where maybe there's somebody else who's better situated to deal with that item, or it would be a real good opportunity for them to learn some new things. So delegate it. And finally, you can defer items. I find that sometimes I can't actually do something straight away because I don't have all the information I need. And so if I am going to use folders, it's only to deal with the items that I'm deferring. So those 4 Ds have stood me in good stead.
Simon, king of the 4 Ds. Very good. Angie, how about yourself? You've got some very strong views on notifications and the like, I think, yeah?
Yeah, I have actually, because going back to what we were saying about having prioritising to-do lists, I think it's really important that sometimes we just turn off the alerts. You're absolutely right, permanently attached, and I think often we get dragged into, we have a lovely to-do list first thing in the morning, we then read emails and we start going off and getting distracted. And I think that is one thing I've found, is that it's very useful to turn off the alerts, work offline. I will frequently do that because it's proven that it takes so much longer. You think you can multitask to then switch what you were actually working on, and it takes ages to get your head and your mind back in. So I've found that offline is much more powerful for me. And also touching the email only once. As Simon's alluded to, do, ditch, delegate and defer. Again, it's useful, and the fact that you can much better now, you're absolutely right. And I used to put my emails into folders, but I no longer do that now. because it's just too time consuming. So I've found that touching it once, dealing with it, ditching it, whatever I need to do with it, does actually make my time far more useful, far more effective, and it's a lot less stressful worrying about emails constantly in and out of the inbox. So that's certainly what I would use.
Yeah. So don't become a slave to it seems to be the summary from everybody here, I think, is make sure you're in control of it rather than the other way around. So some great tips there, I think, Angie. Thank you. Now we may not need to do the next section, of course, because the survey suggested that everyone's got their work-life balance completely sorted. But just in case, or maybe it's just for my benefit, Angie, why don't you guide us through some thoughts on work and life balance?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because work-life balance, they say, really, it should just be about balance. And it is a big challenge these days. We know we're all a lot busier, work lives, and it's all a bit crazy. We're connected constantly. So we almost need to really be aware of what we can do to make it better for us, really. And I think one of the biggest things, and certainly for me as well, and it might you too, but it's getting that balance right, is setting boundaries. So what we do within that, so whether that's dividing up home and work activities, everything's planned in one place. So the diary, you haven't got diaries running here, there and everywhere and worrying about things overlapping. You've got a much more clear approach of what you're doing. And also, I think it gives you clarity and space to think, just to do and be and breathe a bit, because we're all so busy running around, we never really stop to just think. And sometimes we need that. We need to recharge our brains and let gadgets and from work, because we'll be much more effective further on. And I know that's easier said than done, but it certainly does pay to do that. And I think one of the interesting things is that leaving work at the office, and that can be a challenge for us all, really. Whether you work in a team and you've got to take stuff home with you, there's always that temptation. I'll just do that. I'll just take that file home with me. So you never really separate, and your balance gets pulled in maybe the wrong direction, and before you know it, you're doing it all the time. So I think it's really important that we allow that time to be able to just step back and have discipline, that we mentally switch off when we go home. Maybe we have an evening where we switch our phones off, no email alerts, nothing, and we just put the tasks mentally in a box and put it away till tomorrow, and we deal with it tomorrow. Because I think it's really interesting that we're constantly switched on to technology and we're always thinking about something else, so we need to almost be in that present. But what have you got some tips about how this might work for commuters, Pete? Because obviously they're constantly attached to gadgets, as we are often commuters ourselves. So what can you maybe suggest from that perspective that could help?
Well, I've got one practical solution and one rather drastic one. So I'll start with the really drastic one, is completely change your life and your role so that you no longer have a commute. So the last 3 years my commute tends to be to my office just in the garage of the house, really. So the commuting issues have gone behind me, but I had many years of commuting from deepest Hampshire up to London every day. And one of the things which I have to confess, I was never that brilliant at this, but I admired people who did, and I have tried to practice it, was to, particularly if a long commute, a long train ride, a long car journey on the way home, this tip was to choose a point on that journey on the way home every day and say, that is my switch point. From that point onwards, for the rest of the journey home, I'm going to be thinking about home-related stuff, and I will leave the office mentally behind at that point. And the benefit, when one can practice that, the benefit, of course, is that when you get home, you are now decompressed, and if you live with people, then they will be very grateful for that, and you actually use that journey home as a bit of a decompress. So that I thought was a very useful tip tip. Kind of related to that as well, and you touched on it already. This term of the digital detox, Angie. I think increasingly this is an issue for all of us. You know, we see all the stats that say the phone is the last thing we say good night to, and it's the first to say good morning to in the morning, and I find that a little bit scary, frankly. So personally, I've made a pledge to myself that I don't take my phone to bed. I leave it downstairs in the kitchen. But you know, increasingly we're seeing people starting to say, let's endeavour to have a detox, you know, digital detox. Turn off all the gadgets for the weekend. It takes a bit of persuasion with my children, I have to say, but from time to time, I think it will do us all good. Just as a dry January might, if you overindulged over Christmas. And you know, I would also just ask, you know, there is no mandate, as I said earlier, there's no mandate that says you have to take your devices with you when you go on holiday. You will end up having a much holiday if you don't. And you know, once you've left them behind, they are behind, and it may be tough to leave, but once it's done, it's a pretty good cold turkey, I think.
I think that actually, Peter, is a very good point. When I do my leadership management training, that's one of my biggest bugbears, is that people do not leave their phones behind and switch it off. What they'll do is they'll take it on holiday and be permanently switched on, worrying about what's going on back at the office. And I think it's respectful to yourself and maybe to the people you're on holiday with that you need to have some downtime. I think it's really, really important. So the digital detox, as you say, it's quite hard to do. We all get very addicted to our phones, but it's not impossible. And I think maybe we should do that and say, let's have a dry month of just having some downtime away from our technology. And I think it's interesting when we're very busy that you schedule that time away from your phone, and also get more to have a bit of rest time, exercise, some breaks. My downtime is in the morning, first thing. I switch my phone off and I go for a walk, a bike ride, and I get an hour of calm and peace before a hectic day. And that sets me up and it makes my brain recharge and I feel a lot better. If I'm leaving very early and I can't do that, I really notice it. So it's important for me, and I think it's about finding time to do that. Before I used to just switch my laptop on and just go straight into work, and I've found it's much better for me to make time to do that walk and just get some fresh air. And I think the interesting in present and like mindfulness, which I know is quite a hot topic at the moment, because our heads are always so busy, maybe we miss opportunities to just that are vital for our well-being. That, you know, I think rest time is probably, I would say, my humble opinion, maybe the #1 skill of a change maker is having downtime, being really proactive about what you do and having breaks so you're much more productive. Because once we get back into work mode and into our business heads again, it's a lot easier and we come back with a fresh set of eyes, we're more energized, we get our mojo back. And I know it's not easy, but I think it can be done with a bit of practice over time. What about you, Simon? How do you sort of approach balance? What do you think?
Thanks, Angie. It's interesting. About 10, 12 years ago, I was doing a lot of work with organizations and individuals, helping them implement flexible working. And work-life balance was a really big topic at the time. The government were getting behind it, and a lot of organizations were trying to work out work-life balance schemes, etc. And what we found was if you try to implement a one-size-fits-all policy, it just doesn't work. For all of us, balance is very different. How we recoup our energy, how we get to that point where we can say, right, I'm ready for the next task, is very different. So, and we'll discuss a bit more on this later in the week when we talk about the difference, for example, between extroverts and introverts. So saying that everybody needs to organize their work-life balance in a specific prescriptive way, we found doesn't work. And so whenever I'm coaching individuals, it's always with a view to exactly what's going to work for you. Let's devise a program of work-life balance that's going to work for you, and then that obviously increases their motivation, and they're ready to roll with it. In fact, I've got I'm going to post something in the chat here, which is a link for everybody if they want to go and after the webinar to assess how they're doing in terms of work-life balance. They've got a little work-life balance test for you. So if you copy and paste that and go and have a look at that after the webinar for a bit of fun, I think you'll enjoy that. Okay, I can tell that we're getting through a lot of this content. We're a little bit behind schedule, a couple of minutes behind schedule. So Angie's contesting that work-life balance is the #1 skill of a change maker. I would argue slightly differently, and that is that for me it's all about prioritization, because if you can work out your priorities within the context of your life, then actually work-life balance becomes easier to organize and to make happen. So what we've thought about, if you think about the 4 issues that we've discussed this evening, we've discussed being overwhelmed, we've discussed emails, we discussed meetings, and we discussed work-life balance. So in all 4 of those, if you've actually sorted out what your priorities are in life, then actually none of those become an issue anymore. So for example, if I know what my priorities are, then I can review my emails and decide, okay, these 3 relate to my #1 priority right now. So that's what I'm going to work with. If I've sorted out my priorities, I can decide whether I'm going to sit through the whole of a meeting or whether I'm going to ask if I can be there for the first part of the agenda and then leave once my part is completed. I'm more empowered to have those sort of business-focused conversations with my colleagues, my managers, if I understand what my priorities are. If I'm prioritized and I'm planning my day according to my priorities, then I've already eaten into that feeling of tension and nervousness around will I get everything done, which is the sense of overwhelm people feel when they're not prioritized and they're not working to a plan. And finally, in terms of work-life balance, if I know what my priorities are, it doesn't matter what everybody else's priorities are around me. If I know what my priorities are, then I can organize my time, I can organize my work-life balance. So we, Pete and Angie and I were discussing that ahead of this evening, and we felt that actually prioritization really does enable us to do all of those things much better. And just in terms of being able to sort out your priorities, I'd recommend to you that you think through 4 categories. I'm going to share a slide with you just so that you can see what I'm talking about very quickly. And just present that to everyone, and hopefully you can all see that now. Basically, this is a life map, and with a life map you can sort through very quickly, a bit like that sort of brain dump activity, the mind sweep that Pete was talking about earlier. Live, love, learn, leave one legacy. Use that like a mind map to decide all the things you would love to do if time and money were no object in your life. And what you'll end up with is a hell of a lot of dreams on a page. Things that if time and money were no object, you'd love to do. Time you'd like to spend with the people that matter to you in your life. Things you'd love to learn if time was no obstacle, and things you'd love to do and for people to remember you by in terms of the legacy piece. Now, most people say, well, that's just a dream, so what can I do with that? Well, my favorite definition of a goal is that it's a dream with a date on it. So all you need to do is pick some of those items on your life map and put a date on them and give yourself that deadline that Angie was talking about earlier. And all of a sudden you can start to see that prioritization becomes 10 times simpler than it would have been without this little insight and tapping into your brain that we were talking about. Okay, I'm going to stop talking about that because that's the #1 priority that we decided. Any last points, Angie and Pete, on that? No, Pete's okay. Angie?
I think I'd just like to add with regards to the priority is that when we write it down, they're suddenly quite surprised at how much they want to get done and how quickly time flies. And I think it's quite fascinating that when people sit back and think about it, they're quite shocked at how quickly and that we don't get things done. So I highly encourage everyone to look at that mind map. And even if they can't think 5 years ahead, maybe even just 1 year or 2 years ahead, and just do some mini goals and some of the tips from tonight that yourself and Pete and me have we've all experienced with our lives, if you like, and what we do in our business. So it's all a matter of just trying different things, I think.
Excellent. Thank you, Angie. Okay, right. I did say that we had a special offer that we wanted to make for you this evening, and this is for everybody who's on the summit live or will be watching this on the replay. Pete and I have been working on the development of what we call the complete Mastering Time program, and this is a set of 3 webinars that we'll be delivering live and 90 minutes each. This will start in just a couple of weeks' time, and there are 3 elements to that: the whole 24/7 system, something called the time machine, which is something you're going to love in terms of improved productivity, and then the master key to make it sustainable. What we found in all our work that we've done on this sort of stuff is that people do make tactical changes to what they're doing. They do try out new tools, and they find very quickly that they've reverted back to old ways of thinking about things and doing things. And actually, what the difference, if you like, that the Mastering Time program can make for you is that it will make any changes that you implement, and we will show you how to do that in a very guided, step-by-step way. You can integrate these systems into your approaches seamlessly, very simply. But the key is we can help you do that sustainably. So it's 3 webinars hosted by Pete and I, and we'll take you through all of that. And in addition, we will also just go back to here. We've also got a couple of bonuses for you. For those of you picking this up now, while you're waiting for the next 14 days, there's a copy of the book which we'll send you, and a whole bunch of other little activities to get you prepared for this program, which will absolutely blow your mind in terms of the transformation that it can achieve. And then the final webinar that we'll do is what we're calling an accountability forum, and that's a live Q&A with Pete and I, where you can bring back all the things that you've tried to implement, tell us how you're doing, what's working for you, what could be improved, and we will help you work through those issues. We've got an online Mastering Time club to go with it, and again, Pete and I will provide full email support throughout the program. So if you're interested in that offer, I will just put up in the side here the information on that, and then after the program, you can go and click through there and decide if that's something you'd like to come and join us on. So there we are. That's the offer I wanted to make you now. We've got a few questions in here, so let's start with this one from Steve. So I've heard the theory of processing emails at set times before, but not done it. You really need to inform senders if that's done, what you intend to do, so they know to phone if it's truly urgent. And you're absolutely right, Steve. I often talk to people about you need to train the people that you work with. So otherwise, people may expect to hear from you immediately. But the reality is, when you send an email, you don't necessarily expect the person you're sending it to respond immediately. So why put the pressure on ourselves to respond urgently? So that's one thing I do work through with people is to help them understand they don't need to do things immediately just because they've turned up in their email box. But you're absolutely right. You do need to train the key people around you on the set times that you might want to respond to them. Pete or Angie, anything to add there?
Yeah, I was just going to add, Simon, what I have seen a few people do now is to start to put something on their email signature, just to say, I will only check email, at lunchtime and in the afternoon, so that it actually just gets people into that discipline of that. And so long as you give them a more immediate way of getting hold of you if there's something urgent, like a text message or whatever, then that seems to be perfectly acceptable to most people.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Another question here from John. On meetings, is it worth having a quick evaluation at the end? What went well and what could be better? And then act on this. Angie, what do you think? Oh, it's gone very dark.
I think that is a phenomenal idea. I know, I'm going to put the light on. Hang on a second.
While Angie's doing that, Pete, what do you think?
Can you see me now?
Oh, she's back.
I'm back. I was putting the light on. Sorry, the daylight suddenly disappeared. Yes, I think actually it would be really useful to do that. I think it's a great idea to have a catch-up, to find out how progress has, what's been made during the meeting. I think it's an excellent idea, and because I think people around the table, anyone who's involved, it's almost a summary, a reminder of accountability. It's an excellent idea to do that, and then maybe if things haven't gone quite so well, rather than it becoming a blame situation, we could maybe use it to learn and move forward for next meetings. So yeah, I think it's a brilliant idea.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, another one here from Nicola. How do you suggest we deal with people who are trying to get you to do things that are not on your priority list? Pete?
I think you've got the answer in the question there almost, actually. I think the strongest defense that you have is to have a good to-do list yourself. And so then it becomes a bargaining thing that says thank you very much for this suggestion of this additional work. I can see why it's important to you. Which of these priorities that I'm working on, this is a conversation with a boss more than anything else, I would suggest. But here's what I'm planning to be working on over the next several hours. If you think you have something that's of a greater priority, then something else has to slip. So I think having that defense of your own intentional plan is the best defense you can have.
Yeah. Excellent. And Steve's got a question. Is there research to show flexible working doesn't work as a one-size-fits-all, as we are constantly being asked to implement it? Well, I can only share with you, Steve, what we found was that if you did try to implement it as a one-size-fits-all, it quickly fell apart. So I don't know how you are experiencing things where you are, but we found the best approach was to get teams talking to each other, helping them understand each other's priorities, each other's activities, in the context of what sort of time they could commit to, given the activities that the team needed to complete. So actually it created better conversations by having that as a topic, is how are we going to get everything done, who needs some flexibility, and let's honor that and see if we can make that happen. And the reality of that is that it isn't one size fits all, and most people don't need as much as sometimes a one size fits all solution offers. So yeah, we used to talk a lot about the guiding principles of flexible working rather than the rules, and we found that organizations got a long way with that. Okay, anything else here? John's got a question. Any other questions before we wrap up? Angie, you'll love to hear that Ian's gone back to a paper planner because it doesn't fill up from email, it only fills up when he writes in it. Thanks, Ian. That,
I know he's got a good excuse to buy some lovely Sharpie pens now and go and get some decent stationery. So there we go.
And it doesn't need Wi-Fi either.
Yeah. There we are. So
Exactly.
Steve, I'm just reading the comments here. Steve said, yeah, we ask staff to work with line managers on flexible work, and that's exactly it, Steve. The line manager is critical in most organizations for making this happen. So good luck with your strategy, but go in confidently with your ideas, and I'm sure you'll get the right result. Okay, I think we've got through all of the questions. Any last things you'd like to say in summary, Angie or Pete? Let's start with Pete.
I would just say, some great questions there, some great comments from my colleagues as well. I would just say, just keep experimenting with this and keep yourself fresh on it. I really like the idea of some people saying, I'm going back to a paper planner. Why not? In 6 months' time, they may want to go more digital again or whatever. I think there's a degree of the freshness that you get just by changing it up every now and again. Just gives us a slight motivational boost. So keep playing, I say. Great tip. Angie?
I would agree. I think there's been some fantastic points there. And I think even there was mentioned about asking what went well at the meeting and having a bit of a wrap-up summary is a great idea. As Pete says, it's go and try something different. Be brave. Some things will work, some things won't. But definitely try the digital detox, because I've tried it. It's hard work getting yourself disconnected from Wi-Fi, but you feel a lot better for it. So I'm going to challenge you to try that just for a few hours and see how you get on. And go back refreshed. And I think, as Pete says so beautifully, it's re-energizing you and trying something different, new spin on things. But good luck.
Thank you, Angie, and thank you, Pete. So after we shut down the broadcast, the chat box will still be open, so feel free to use that. Go back and look at the comments, and if you have any further questions when we shut down the broadcast, by all means write them in there and we'll get them. I'm just going to finish with some information about tomorrow morning's summit, which will be starting again at midday tomorrow, and we'll have Nikki Carew and Vanda North back to replay and in fact give us even more detail on the workplace, of well-being, and I'm sure you're going to get a lot of great stuff out of that. So if you haven't already signed up for that one, then go and sign up now, join that one, and we will see you back here at 12 tomorrow. So have a lovely evening, and look forward to seeing some of you in the complete Mastering Time program, when we're going to go into a lot more detail than we've been able to do this evening, and really give you the structure that will help you as you try and pull your work-life balance together and overcome that overwhelm. So click on the offers section that you have in your window, and you can go through from there, and Pete and I look forward to meeting some of you there. Okay, good night everybody, take care.
Good night.